Welcome to Trendlines, which focuses on the trends in the off-highway equipment industry. I'm Becky Schultz, Senior Editor of Diesel Progress, and joining me today is Chris Sleight, Managing Director, Off-Highway Research. Off-Highway Research recently began authoring the Trendlines column that appears in each issue of Diesel Progress. And to get a better understanding of the value this information provides, I think it might be helpful, Chris, if you could share with the audience a little bit about who Off-Highway Research is and the type of research it conducts globally. Can we start off with that?
Yeah, thank you, Becky. It's good to be here. Yeah, so Off-Highway Research is a market research and forecasting company, and we focus specifically on the off-highway world. So predominantly construction equipment, but we have a bit of a foot in the agricultural world as well. As people will tell from my accents, I'm British and I'm based in the UK at our head office, but I have colleagues in China, India, and North America, and Latin America, and we also have some partners in other parts of the world, most notably Japan. I think we should also say that, for the sake of full disclosure, that Becky and I are colleagues. Both Diesel Progress and Off-Highway Research is part of the KHL Group.
Thanks for that, Chris. So diving right into our topic here, in the most recent Trendlines column for the March issue of Diesel Progress, the focus was on the growth in the popularity of compact track loaders, or we'll abbreviate them as CTLs. When the CTL first came out in roughly the 1980s, they were seen more as a niche product in the construction industry, primarily for use in challenging underfoot conditions or in applications that required really low ground pressure. And I suspect not even the manufacturers themselves anticipated how quickly they would catch on in North America, or that we would see sales surpass skid steer loaders. Can you maybe provide a brief synopsis of how that came about and some of the reasons behind it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right in that. I think when these machines first came out, I mean, I remember, as perhaps you do, sitting in press conferences for the PosiTrack products, which were the early forerunners from ASV, and the whole selling point there was, okay, this machine exerts less pressure on the ground than a human does through their footprint. So, all right, wow, that's impressive, but you know, what's it for? And then I think in the late 90s and particularly the early 2000s, we started to see more and more compact track loaders appearing at trade shows, and they were obviously selling. At that point, sales were picking up quite nicely, but of course you had the subprime crisis and then the global financial crash. And the fundamental thing about these machines is, yes, they have a lot of applications, but it really is residential construction which drives their sales. So they were going along nicely in the early 2000s, and then obviously there was huge turmoil in the residential construction market, and it took, you know, more than a decade from the subprime crisis for house building to come back to, you know, anything that you would think of as being normal. And really, that's what's happened in the you know, since the pandemic, when the lockdown happened. You know, obviously people were working from home a lot more, so they wanted to extend their properties. A lot of people wanted to move to bigger properties. There was a lot of money around from payroll protection and obviously not spending, and of course interest rates were absolutely rock bottom. And you see in data from organizations like the Census Bureau that from the middle of 2020, residential construction went absolutely through the roof, absolutely skyrocketed. And that's really what's driven the surge in sales of compact track loaders. You know, from a market that was trending upwards, sort of 40, 50, 60,000 machines per year, we're now looking at a market that's sort of 80, 85, 90, 95,000 compact track loaders a year, which is, you know, this, as you were saying, absolutely unthinkable when we think back to those press conferences of sort of 20 and 25 years ago.
Definitely. And I'm just curious, I mean, that's a huge jump in sales. Do you foresee that continuing? Are the market factors still in place that could continue going forward, at least for 2023 and possibly longer?
Well, there are a couple of factors there that are sort of tensioning off against each other, I would say. I think the first thing to say is, as we're all aware, lead times have been very, very long, and order books are full. So, you know, in equipment in general, and not just compact track loaders, we expect 2023 to be quite a good year, just because manufacturers and distributors are fulfilling a very long backlog of orders. That is obviously against the backdrop of deteriorating economy last year, and you know, the possibility of a mild recession this year. Interest rates, of course, have gone up very sharply in the last 12 to 18 months, and that really does have an impact on residential construction in the same way that those very low interest rates sent residential construction to the stars. So, you know, personally, I believe that 2022 will probably be the high tide mark for compact track loader sales. But I mean, what a high tide mark it's been. And even if the market falls by 5, 10, or even 15%, you know, the volumes will be historically very, very good this year. But, you know, I think with all the economic pressures that are out there in 23, we probably will see a bit of a slump, and maybe again into 24. But fundamentally, long term, I think things look good for the compact track loaders. Depending on what report you believe, the shortfall of housing in the US is at least 3 million houses, maybe twice that amount. So, you know, there is a lot of house building that still needs to happen in a fairly short space of time. And like I said, you know, there are lots of applications for these machines, but clearly residential construction is absolutely the dominant one.
Okay, great. Now, obviously, North America and the U.S. in particular has they've long dominated when it comes to both skid steers and compact track loader sales. Just to kind of kick us off, can you share some statistical background on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you're absolutely right. You know, skid steer loaders and compact track loaders really are quintessentially American products. It's, you know, they had, you know, it was the Melrose brothers, wasn't it, who got things going in the 50s. So yes, the center of gravity for both these products is North America. North America represents about 80% of global skid steer loader sales, and 90 to, you know, even 95% of compact track loader sales. So yes, these machines do sell in other parts of the world. Compact track loaders, not so much. There's a bit of a market on this side of the Atlantic in Italy and a few parts of Southern Europe. But in most other countries of the world, you can measure the market really without having to take your shoes and socks off and count how many machines are sold each year. Skid steer loaders are a bit different. They've obviously been around a lot longer, so they are established in different parts of the world. But again, you know, nothing really like the popularity that you see in North America or you've seen historically in North America. So it is a product type. Both product types are very much about the North American market.
So you don't anticipate seeing any significant growth in the near term in other global markets?
I think the first thing to say is that things don't really seem to happen that quickly in the construction equipment world. You know, play out over 5, 10, 20 years. I mean, we've been talking about compact track loaders as happening quickly in the construction equipment market, and they have, but quickly is 20 years in construction equipment. So yeah, I think the short answer is, you know, they may gather acceptance in other parts of the world, but it does tend to be a very sort of slow burn. So no real hotspots on the horizon, I don't think.
I'm just curious, do you have any thoughts on why the skid steer and the compact track loader have been predominantly North American machines and haven't really caught on elsewhere?
I think, you know, you see these little trends in all sorts of markets around the world, and it's really what's historically been available to the equipment users. So yeah, you know, the skid steer loader was born in the American Midwest. It was popularized in that part of the world, and that was the machine that was available to contractors and farmers, of course, when it came to these these small sort of compact loader type applications. Is completely different over here in Europe, where we don't really have any heritage of manufacturing skid steer loaders or the same sort of history. So the same tasks need to be done, but it's things like compact wheel loaders and tractor loader backhoes that have kind of been the products on hand here. So yeah, you see these little quirks all around the world. In China, there is a decent skid steer loader market in terms of the numbers sold, but those numbers pale in comparison to the huge number of wheel loaders that are made each year in China, and that's the product that's traditional, that's been available, and which remains relatively cheap as well. So I think it comes down to what people are used to, what they're used to buying, and what they're used to using. And in North America, it's been skid steers and compact track loaders that have been available.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So looking at the demand in the North American market for these products, how is it influencing both where they're being manufactured, but also the number of suppliers that are coming into this market?
Well, a very good question. So obviously, we've been talking about it in the context of an American product, and most compact track loaders and skid steer loaders are made in North America and are sold in North America. Having said that, you've had two very successful suppliers in Kubota and Takeuchi that have served the market historically with a product imported from Japan. Now, both those companies in the last year have started up production in the US, Kubota in Kansas and Takeuchi in South Carolina. So I think that's that makes sense, but it's indicative of how high the volumes have risen, that obviously a tipping point has been reached, that those companies are able to invest in local production in North America. So yes, it's a question about, you want to manufacture as close to where the market is. And I'm sure that kind of thinking was hastened by all the supply chain and shipping headaches that the world has seen in the last 2 years. All of a sudden, importing products across a wide ocean doesn't look so clever when shipping isn't available, and you've got all those problems to deal with. So logistically, it makes a lot of sense to manufacture in North America.
Right. And what about the number of suppliers, the different brands that are coming into the market? Are we seeing any changes there?
Well, I think I would be happier answering that in a month's time after ConExpo. Yeah, I think you would say that given the number of these machines that are sold each year, the number of companies supplying them is still relatively small. You've got across both skid steers and compact track loaders, you've probably only got a dozen or so supplying in serious numbers. There may be small manufacturers here and there, but they're probably a dozen recognized brands, which is not many when you consider that together skid steers and compact track loaders are something like 125,000 machines per year. So yes, I'm sure the manufacturers of the world that are not in the North American market for these machines are probably looking on with interest. One or two have come out and said they will launch products at ConExpo. Hyundai is one that springs to mind immediately, because they're re-entering the skid steer loader market as well as getting into compact track loaders for the first time. But obviously there are other suppliers in the construction equipment space, in the kind of yellow iron space that do the excavators and wheel loaders and machines like that, and in the compact equipment space, but aren't yet making skid steers or compact track loaders, or if they are making them, they're not selling them in North America yet. But yes, I'm sure a market of that size that's shown that sort of growth dynamic will attract a few more suppliers over time.
Is there anything else that you would like to share with us about this conversation, Chris, or about off-highway research in general?
Well, I think the final point I would make is that we've talked about the growth of compact track loaders. I'm not really sure if we sort of made it clear that has come to a certain extent at the expense of skid steer loaders. You know, if you went back to the 1990s, skid steer loaders were the dominant compact machines sold in North America. North America is still by far the largest skid steer loader market,
Right.
but it's very clear that as compact track loaders have come up, they've eaten away a little bit at the sales of skid steer loaders. And I think that's one of those things that comes down to, yes, okay, compact track loaders are more expensive, but they can do so much more in terms of the ground conditions that they can deal with, providing a bit of a smoother ride to the operator and things like that. So yes, it has been a success story, but it's eaten away at skid steer loaders a little bit. But of course, there are still applications where skid steer loaders are great. You know, if you're working on hard standing, then you probably want to be on tires rather than tracks. Yeah, there are quite a few applications where a skid steer loader would still outperform the tracked equivalent.
Definitely, absolutely. Well, that appears to be all the time we have today. Chris, thank you so much for joining me again. Chris Sleight from Off Highway Research. Appreciate the time, and thank you all for joining us.